The woman had 7 minutes to catch her flight. She ran through the airport, clutching her passport and boarding pass. This wasn't just another flight. If she made it, she would finally meet the company's CEO and interview for the job she had spent months trying to get. She reached the gate just as boarding was about to close. Then she saw him. An elderly man was lying on the floor near the boarding area. People were walking around him. Some looked. Nobody stopped. The woman slowed down. She looked at the gate, then at the old man. A flight attendant announced, "Final boarding for flight 417. Her heart started racing. She had seconds to decide. She could run through the gate or stay. She dropped her bag beside the old man. "Sir, can you hear me?" His eyes slowly opened. "Please," he whispered. The woman immediately called for medical help. A few minutes later, airport staff arrived. But by then, the boarding gate had closed. Her flight was gone. She stood there watching the plane disappear through the glass. The job interview was gone too. She had sacrificed the biggest opportunity of her life for a stranger she didn't even know. As the paramedics prepared to take the old man away, he suddenly reached for her hand. "Thank you," he whispered. She smiled sadly. "You're okay. That's what matters." She picked up her bag and walked away. She had no idea that she had just made a decision that would change the rest of her life. And she had no idea why that old man had been at that airport in the first place. 3 days later, she was still thinking about the old man. She had lost the interview. She had lost the opportunity she had worked so hard for. And now she was back at her small apartment, sending applications to companies that never replied. One evening, while going through her emails, she received a message from the airport regarding flight 417. Her heart stopped. She opened it. The message wasn't about the flight. It was about the elderly man. The airport staff wanted to know if she could provide a statement about what had happened that day. She agreed. The next morning, she returned to the airport. A security officer led her to a quiet office. He placed a small envelope on the table. This was found in the man's belongings. She looked at it. Her name was written on the front. She stared at the envelope in confusion. "I don't understand. He didn't even know my name." The officer shook his head. "We don't understand either." She slowly opened it. Inside was a photograph. It showed a much younger version of the old man standing beside a little girl. On the back of the photograph, someone had written, "She saved my life once. Now I need to save hers." The woman looked up. "Who is the girl?" The officer hesitated. "We're trying to find out." She looked at the photograph again. Something about the little girl's face felt strangely familiar, but she couldn't explain why. Then her phone rang. It was her mother. And the moment she answered, her mother's voice made her blood run cold. "Where are you?" "I'm at the airport." "What?" There was a long silence. Then her mother whispered, "You need to come home. There's something I should have told you years ago." When she reached home, her mother was waiting for her. The moment she walked through the door, she knew something was wrong. Her mother was holding an old photograph. The same photograph. The little girl beside the old man. The woman stared at it. "Mom, who is she?" Her mother sat down slowly. Then she looked at her daughter. "That's you." The woman froze. "What?" Her mother took a breath. "When you were 6 years old, you became seriously ill. You needed an operation, but we had no money. We thought we were going to lose you." The woman stared at the photograph, trying to remember. Then her mother continued. "There was a man who paid for your treatment. He disappeared before we could even thank him." The woman looked again at the photograph. The old man. The same old man who had collapsed at the airport. Her voice trembled. "That's him." Her mother nodded. "He saved your life." The woman couldn't speak. For years, she had believed her family had simply been lucky. She had never known there had been a stranger behind that miracle. But one question kept haunting her. Why had he been at the airport? And why had he carried a photograph of her? 30 years later? The woman couldn't sleep that night. She kept staring at the photograph. A 6-year-old version of herself stood beside the old man. But there was something else bothering her. Her mother had said he disappeared after paying for her treatment. So why had he suddenly appeared 30 years later? And why had he been at the exact airport she was flying from? The next morning, she returned to the airport and asked about him. A security officer checked the records. Then his expression changed. "There's something you should know." He turned the monitor toward her. The old man had arrived at the airport 2 hours before her flight. He wasn't traveling, the officer said. He didn't have a ticket. The woman stared at him. Then why was he there? The officer pulled up the security footage. The old man had been sitting near her departure gate, waiting. The woman watched the footage again, and then she noticed something that made her heart race. The old man wasn't looking at the departure board. He was watching her. The officer paused the video. "He arrived before you did." The woman whispered. "So he knew I was coming?" The officer nodded. "But we still don't know why." Then he handed her another envelope. This was found in his coat. Her hands began to tremble. There was only one sentence inside. "She must not take flight 417. The woman stared at the words. Her flight. The same flight she had missed because she stopped to help him. For the first time, she wondered, had missing that plane really been a coincidence? The woman couldn't take her eyes off the message. She must not take flight 417. Her mind raced. If he knew something was going to happen, why didn't he just tell me? The security officer didn't have an answer. She asked to see the footage again. This time, she noticed something she had missed before. Just before she reached the gate, the old man had received a phone call. He listened for a few seconds, then looked directly toward her. His face suddenly changed. Fear, not confusion, not surprise. Fear. The woman leaned closer to the screen. "Can you zoom in?" The officer did. The old man was holding something in his hand, a small piece of paper. The woman recognized the handwriting immediately. It was the same handwriting as the message. She felt a chill run through her. Then the officer received another notification. He opened it. His face went pale. "What happened?" she asked. He slowly turned the screen toward her. The airline had just confirmed that Flight 417 had experienced a serious emergency shortly after takeoff. The woman couldn't breathe. That was the flight she had been desperate to catch. The flight she had cried over missing. The flight she had believed would change her life. She looked back at the photograph of the old man. And suddenly, one question became impossible to ignore. How did he know? But before she could ask anything else, her phone rang. It was the hospital. The old man was awake, and he had asked for her by name. She rushed to the hospital. When she entered the room, the old man was lying quietly in the bed. His eyes opened. The moment he saw her, he smiled. "You came." She moved closer. "Why did you stop me from taking that flight?" The old man looked toward the window. "Because I knew what was going to happen." Her heart pounded. Ow! He reached beneath his pillow and pulled out an old envelope. "I've been trying to find you for years." She stared at him. "Why?" He looked at her with tired eyes. "Because after I paid for your operation, I thought my part in your life was finished. But years later, I learned something." He handed her the envelope. "Your father had once saved my life." She opened it. Inside were old documents and a photograph of her father. The old man continued. "When your family needed help, your father helped me without asking for anything. When I discovered what happened to your family, I wanted to repay him." She looked at the documents. "But why now?" The old man became silent. Then he said, "Because I discovered someone was trying to take something that belonged to you." Her expression changed. "What?" He looked directly into her eyes. "Your father's company." She froze. Her father had died years ago, and she had always believed there was nothing left. The old man whispered, "That's why I needed you to miss that flight. But there's something you still don't know." He handed her one final document. Her father's name was at the top. She stared at the document. It was a legal ownership agreement. Her father's name was listed as the original owner of a company she had never heard of. "What is this?" The old man took a slow breath. "Your father didn't lose his company. He was forced to give it up." She looked at him in disbelief. "By whom?" The old man pointed to another name on the document. Her heart sank. It was the name of the man who had taken over the company after her father's death. The same company she had unknowingly been flying to interview for. The same company that had invited her to Flight 417's destination. She suddenly understood why the old man had been waiting for her. But there was another question. Why didn't my father tell me? The old man looked down. Because he wanted you to have a normal life. He thought the truth would put you in danger. She felt tears building in her eyes. For 30 years, she had thought her father had left her nothing. Now she was discovering that he had spent his final years protecting something that belonged to her. Then the old man said quietly, "Your father left one final message." He reached for another envelope. "This is the reason I searched for you." She opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter, and the first line made her heart stop. "If my daughter ever finds this letter, tell her I never stopped fighting for her." Her hands began to shake. The old man watched her quietly. She looked up. "What happened to my father?" The old man's eyes filled with sadness. He knew he was dying. But before he died, he discovered that the people around him were planning to take everything from you. He didn't trust anyone. So he hid the ownership documents and asked me to protect them until you were old enough to understand. She wiped her tears. "Then why didn't you find me earlier?" "I tried." The old man looked away. "But the people who took your father's company were watching me. I couldn't risk leading them to you." The room fell silent. Then the woman remembered something. The flight, the interview, the company. Everything suddenly connected. She looked at the old man. Was the interview really an accident? He shook his head. "No, they were never planning to give you that job." She froze. "They wanted you to sign documents without knowing what you were signing." The woman stared at the letter in her hands. She had thought missing that flight had destroyed her future. But now she realized that missed flight may have saved her from losing her past forever. There was still one thing she couldn't understand. "If they knew I was coming," she asked, "why didn't they simply stop me?" The old man looked at her. "Because they didn't know I had found you." He reached for another document. "This is the evidence your father collected before he died." She looked through the papers. Bank transfers, forged signatures, secret agreements, names, dates. Everything pointed to the same man who had taken control of her father's company. And she saw something that made her blood run cold. Her own signature. She looked at the old man. "I never signed this." "I know," he said. "That is why we have to prove it was forged." For the first time, the woman understood the real danger. Someone had been preparing to use her identity to take the last thing her father had left her. The old man closed his eyes. "Your father spent 30 years protecting you from them." The woman looked at the letter in her hands. And for the first time, she knew she couldn't run from the truth anymore. She had to finish what her father started. She spent the next few weeks investigating everything her father had left behind. With the old man's help, she uncovered the truth. The bank transfers, the forged signatures, the secret agreements. Everything led back to the same man who had stolen her father's company. She took the evidence to the authorities. The investigation was opened. And this time, he couldn't escape. The evidence was undeniable. He was arrested for fraud, forgery, and stealing the company. Months later, The company was legally returned to her. For the first time, she walked through the doors of the company her father had built. Employees stood and applauded. She looked around and smiled through her tears. The old man stood beside her. You finally got it back. She shook her head. No. She looked at him. My father got it back for me. She placed her father's photograph on her desk. The same photograph that had brought her to the truth. And she finally understood. Missing Flight 417 had cost her an interview, but it had led her back to her father's legacy. She had lost one opportunity that day and found the life her father had fought to give her. And this time, she wasn't going to lose it. Comment a heart if you believe everything happens for a reason and subscribe for more.